I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, or the Urbana Socialist Forum, or UPTV. You'd think I would know that by now and I wouldn't have to read it, but I always feel better when I'm looking at it. Anyway, welcome. Would you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, I'm Evan Keller. I'm a junior at University of Illinois. I'm an intern with the Champaign-Urbana Immigration Forum. That's why I'm here tonight. And I'm, like I said, I'm a junior studying political science, Spanish, and communication.
Did they teach you when you start going to college to introduce yourself like that?
Well, in every class and every organization, the classic things you introduce yourself with are the same, name, year, and major. Yeah, so those are the three that are constant, I would say. Sometimes where you're from, but that's pretty rare. And everybody's from the suburbs anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Most everybody.
Well, it was interesting. I also do a show on Wednesdays called the 11th Indian Show, and my co-host lives in Minnesota, and she is a Lakota woman, and we talk about indigenous issues. And we had a guest here who was Diné from the Southwest, and so they went through this whole, I'm from this clan, from this group, this reservation. It's a whole sort of way that Native people introduce themselves. It's like, okay, here's my name, here's my tribe, here's where we're from, here's some things about my people and how I'm related to them and all this stuff. And it was interesting because I had a listener who sent an email to me after that and was like, oh, that was really interesting. I'd never run across that before, And this person was talking about how at like faculty events and things, it was always kind of annoying when people like, well, I'm Professor so-and-so and I'm the endowed chair of blah, blah, blah. And it just always seemed like this really like exclusive thing, like, oh, can you match my credentials? Sort of thing, and it really annoyed her. But when she heard this kind of introduction, it was like, oh, that's really interesting. It was sort of like being taken into someone's life and given a sort of a view of who they are, and that got me thinking about how people in general introduce themselves to each other. Like if we met at a party, let's say we're standing around and everybody's talking, probably the first thing we would do is talk about occupation. So you would say, right, oh, I'm a student at the University of Illinois, and I'd go, oh, I work at a nonprofit, and that would be how we'd orient ourselves to each other. And then we might, if we were taking it a step farther, you might say, I'm from Southern Illinois, and I was, and it's just, it always interested me to look at the different ways that people feel they need to position themselves in an introduction and sort of to say, here's how you can understand who I am. Right. And I think that's an interesting thing. So students seem to have this very ritualized technique. It's pretty good because it's like, okay, so now I know you're a political scientist. I know you're interested in politics. I know you're studying Spanish, so you know a little about that language, and I can ask you, it's very helpful for me as an interviewer to get an introduction like that, because sometimes people just go, yeah, my name's John. Like, okay, so what brings you here today, John? And then you have to like pull everything out of them. But this way I've got like clues as to who you are. So when you say Southern Illinois, small town, big town?
Yeah, I'm from West Frankfort. It's a town of 8,500, and we're close to SIU Carbondale, about 40 minutes away.
And yet you came to the University of Illinois.
I did.
Didn't think SIU is the Salukis? Who are they down there?
I really like SIU. I like their sports. They're getting better academically. They jumped from, I pay a lot of attention to the academic rankings, a sucker to them, but they jumped from like 180 to 140 this year, so they're doing a lot of things right. But U of I's, probably the best school I got accepted to, and I just thought it was the best decision.
So culture shock up north here? Anything?
Sort of. I don't know. Somewhat of a culture shock. I I had been out. I mean, it's not like I never left Southern Illinois.
Oh,
I
right,
had been to
right.
Chicago some,
Yeah.
but it was different. It was different.
Because I used to travel a lot in my old job, and I was all over the United States, and I noticed people dress better in the South than they do in the North. It's a weird thing to notice, but the farther south you go, the more like people have haircuts and they shave and they wear like clothes. I mean, it's like they seem to attend to personal appearance more the farther south you go, and the farther north you go, it's more like, man, I'm just trying to survive. It gets cold here. I just put on something warm, and
Yeah.
and really it's like really weird to go from the deep south to the north all at once, because it's night and day. You go from people who are kind of have manners and they're very polite and they wear nice clothes to people who are just like, and they don't even, they're rude and unfriendly, and they look like they work in a garage somewhere. I don't know. It's strange. So I was thinking that in culture shock. I don't know if in southern Illinois to central Illinois is that big of a jump, really.
Well, to here, I mean, I'd say this is much more different than the rest of Central Illinois.
Yeah.
I mean, Champaign-Urbana, but
This is more like a Chicago suburb
yeah,
in a lot of ways.
yeah. I mean, I found out the other day, it's like exactly 2.5 hours to home from here, and then 2.5 hours to Chicago, which I like. It's like
wow.
right in the middle.
Right in the middle, yeah. Are there a lot of immigrants in southern Illinois?
No. I mean,
Not like here?
no. I mean, it's certainly like the rest of the United States trending that way. And when I've been home, a few times, and I've started to notice, well, more African American population surge than really Latino or immigrant. But around Carbondale, there's an immigrant population. It's a university town, a lot of Asian Americans. But I mean, I've looked at county by county graphs as far as like immigrant population. It's under 2.5 and 5 in most counties. 5%. It's pretty low, and yeah.
So maybe part of your open-mindedness was just that you had no negative impression, no real impression one way or the other. So you were prepared, just like, okay, I'll take your word for whatever. You seem like a nice person. Okay, immigrants are nice. I don't know. I'm wondering
I think that's an interesting theory. No exposure to yeah.
because in a city like Chicago, for example, it's very segregated.
Right.
And there are whole areas that are like, okay, this is these people, and this is these people, and this is these people, and so there's like a culture of distrust or dislike or whatever. I mean, I'm trying to steer away from saying racism because, yeah, that's there, and there's a lot of it, but it's more than that. It's built also around. You're different, you do different things, you eat different foods, you dress differently, I don't understand you. There's a lot of bigotry or just plain ignorance wrapped into all of that.
Yeah.
And I think if you grow up in a culture like that, where you're just like, oh, this is us, we're the Polish community, and we have our whatever, those guys, I hate them, those guys, I hate them, then it's a lot harder to unlearn all that stuff than if you just go into it with like, I don't know, I've never met anybody like you before, so I'll wait till you tell me who you are, because
I like that theory.
I have no idea. Well, I mean, I don't know. In a sense, I'm calling you ignorant. I don't mean it that way, but I'm just saying that I'm blaming it on ignorance rather than open-mindedness. You could say, no, I thought this through carefully, and I was.
I mean, I think there's a lot of young people in Southern Illinois, and not just Southern Illinois, but Central Illinois and the rest of rural areas that I think they're open to new ideas and new people, but there's a lot of poverty in those areas too, and there's a lot of ability, a lot of things keeping them from moving too. Like moving economically or geographically, and they can't get out of some situations too. And I think, given the opportunity, you'd see a lot more acceptance and movement. But I mean, when barely anybody, goes out of the town to go to college, I mean, it's hard to expect them to have a good understanding of immigrant people or immigrant policies. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that's school funding. It's rural and inner city communities that get, that are funded at 1/5 of the suburban schools.
Mm-hmm.
And and when you say that, you preface it with African Americans and Latino communities, they are much more disadvantaged than white communities as far as education. Absolutely. But there are, like where I come from, there are a lot of rural white communities that they don't get any funding either, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really unreasonable to expect them to be able to, get out of there at any point, and it's sad there too. Really.
How did you do it then? How did you make the leap out of the?
Well, I don't like to.
Because I'm a really smart guy.
Well,
I mean, well, it's okay.
I'm
smart. You're smart.
just parents that were just very open to it. I mean, they, went to 10 college visits with me. They were very, if I could get out, they were open to that happening. And a lot of parents don't want their kids to leave. A lot of parents just think that that's, the place that they're going to be the rest of their lives, and they'd like, the kids to be there too, and their grandkids especially is a factor in it. But I mean,
that's a lot harder in this day and age, though, because there's not that infrastructure in small communities like there used to be. It's like, well, you can take over the shoe shop when I die. It's like that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
It's like I'm barely holding on, and I'm selling shoes and whatever.
I
And
agree with that.
and Walmart came in to the near town, and now everybody's closing down. I mean, there are processes at work that are destroying small communities all over the place. So, I would think that most people would be trying to get out in one way or another,
Yeah.
If not themselves, then at least I want my kids to get out of here because there's no future
I mean,
here.
some do, but I mean, a lot of people, they see community colleges, and I love community colleges, but there's, I think, sometimes an overemphasis on them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, legitimately, they don't see any difference between, doing 2 years at community college and 2 years at university, which, for a lot of people, community college is absolutely the best route, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a slight difference sometimes, and I think they see students and the parents see community college as just kind of a way of staying in the community. And when they say, well, I'll do my 2 years at community college and then I'll go somewhere, and then a lot of stuff happens in that 2 years, and I think they're more rooted there than they thought they'd be, and I think that's one of the things that keeps people sort of where they started.
Mm-hmm. So, as a future politician, how do you resolve these inequities? Because there is some truth. I hate to say this because I'm very much not a right-leaning person, politically speaking, but there is some truth to the idea of if we can keep our rich people rich, our country will be strong, because most of the strength of the United States nowadays is financial. It's no longer in resources as much, because we've pretty much, to use an indigenous perspective, have stolen and used up all our stolen, stuff, and there's nothing left. There's no new exploitable areas to take, really. So now we have to come up with a different way, because the engine of productivity and strength in the U.S. since its inception has been the stealing and exploiting of natural resources. And you may not like the way I'm putting that, but that's really, Europeans came in and like, hey, there's a giant place. There's a lot here that we could exploit, so let's do it. And they did it, and that worked for a long time. But there's not that much of it left to do. There's still some oil in the ground. There's still some timber. There's still a few things that, left to exploit, but not much, not in the same way. So what we're sort of living off of now is the fact that we made so much money doing that throughout all these years that now there's a lot of money here. And we have financial power. Now, as a colonial power, instead of sending troops and colonizing, we just financially colonize, and we culturally colonize through our movies and TV and stuff like that. So U.S. is kind of, its hold on its preeminence is tenuous, I would say, at this point in its history. It has to somehow avoid the mistakes that other great empires have done over the centuries and not collapse under its own weight. But we're not doing a very good job of that. We put tons of money into military. We put tons of money into things that are just like unsustainable, So I'm wondering, since you're talking about going into politics, do you have like a
platform already? No.
a solution to this? I'm just curious because I don't know what I would do. I probably like you. I've had my moments of daydreaming where I'm like, well, what if I just king of the world? How would I fix all this? And I can't come up with it. There's like no way. I can't figure it out.
Well, I follow national politics, and I was in D.C. this summer. I'm very followed a lot, but really, as far as what I care about most and what I think about the most, as far as policy,
yeah,
is definitely Illinois. I think.
Oh, okay.
We have a real opportunity to fit. I mean, Illinois has become an argument used by the right wing for like how liberals or Democrats run a state into the ground. That's how it's become, and they said the same thing about California, New York in some ways, and I think what I think about is how to fix Illinois in a way that, in a progressive way, and I think tax policy is certainly key to that. A progressive income tax. We have a sliding scale on the federal level, but not here in Illinois. I think that's a solution to a lot of the budget problems. Not all. But most care about is school funding reform, like I talked about earlier. I just think it's the cause of a lot of other evils, and people focus on what's Illinois doing wrong in their admissions practices, that only 5% of the university is black, and around the same as Latino, and they're so underrepresented. Well, Illinois could probably do better, but the main problem is the root problem is the funding. When you have African American Latino communities funded at a fifth of the suburban communities, I mean that's the real root problem, and that's what I think causes a lot of the racial segregation we have, and so that's I think about Illinois a lot, and how I would fix Illinois. That's almost my that's my platform at the point is. I don't know. Nationals just seems too big to fix, but I'm very involved in Illinois. And that's what I think about.
It's a time of change. I mean, if you think of Illinois, most of it is farms. You've got Chicago, and then farming. Farming has gone from something that lots of people did now to being a corporate practice. So corporations and or people so the number of people farming now is much smaller than it used to be. The amount of acres being farmed is about the same. Amount of probably the output is even greater than it used to be, but the number of people who actively engage in that process is shrinking. So what do all the people do that used to do that, who live in communities like where you're from? The answer lately has been, get an education and then you can get a real job. But how many real jobs can the economy sustain? How many people sitting at a computer doing stuff, which is what they're talking about mostly, when they talk about getting an education. How many people like that can the economy support? So let's just take Illinois. Is it
And how many of those, real jobs are going to be in, economically disadvantaged communities? I mean, how many are going to be in rural or in, some real poor inner city ones? I don't think. I certainly haven't. I certainly don't know what those jobs look like in my town. I don't think, many inner city residents do either. But I think. I don't know where I was going with that. I mean,
a good politician would go somewhere, which is why we should follow my plan to blah blah blah. Yeah. That's where you seg to your.
I'll work on that.
I
gotta have something on reserve that I can just go to, no matter what we're talking about. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked me that. That makes me think about this, which has nothing to do with what you asked, but I was prepared to talk about this, so I'll talk about it. And that's how they work. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be that kind of politician. But I went to interview school once years ago for something, and they told you they actually teach you to do that. They say, go into an interview with some things that you want to say, and then no matter what they ask you, find a way of connecting that to what you want to say, and then say what you want to say. And at the time I thought, oh, that's so very clever. But as years have gone by, I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I can't do that. I would rather engage somebody as an actual conversation. I don't care if we don't talk about my point. I'll get that in there somewhere. But I don't like that because I think it makes for a very awkward and strange encounter. And but if you read transcripts of interviews, like most of the time, that's exactly what's going on. It's like this question, that answer, this question, that answer. It's like, and they they're so used to it that they just let them do it. It's like, and you didn't answer anything I said. They just go, oh, okay. And here's the next question. And it's like this weird conversation where people are like talking like that. Yeah. And they don't have any, I don't know. It seems strange to me, but anyway. We've gotten pretty far afield from immigration. Is there anything, it sounds like you're doing a lot with your internship stuff. Did Megan give you like a specific goal? Like, I want you to get this done this year
I think the big goal for us, or the big two goals are, I don't know if I mentioned it yet, the Immigrant Health Fair, which we're hoping to plan for the end of October.
Okay.
That's going to be, we haven't set a location yet, but hopefully that's going to be split between a health fair for an hour and a half and then an hour and a half on with a panel of community members and organizers. They're talking about the next legislative push, which is maybe in a year or two, to allow undocumented citizens or undocumented people to access health care, to access state health care in the marketplaces. And so that campaign is just kicking off, and we've been in contact with somebody in Chicago who wants to sort of co-sponsor the event and
cool.
So educate local immigrants about both their health care opportunities now, and then possibly what could be happening in the future and how they could get involved, to help push that. So that's one of the big goals, and then the other, is the stories that we talked about earlier. We want to get some good quality content, and quite a few of those, and get those out in some way in social media or in traditional media. So.
Well, that sounds very cool. I hope you do a better job of that than we did when we first started talking about it, because Immigration Forum has always dreamed larger than our ability to follow through. Actually, we started. Did you know anything about our history?
I mean, I've lightly followed as I've been here for 2 years, but I don't know that. I know you guys were very active during the 2011 when when the comprehensive immigration bill was first being debated, or?
Yeah. Well, we started out strictly as a meeting place for people who were working on immigration stuff, just to get together and talk about what we were doing. So hence the name Forum. It literally was a forum. It was sort of like once a month we'd get together and it'd be like, oh, so here's what I've been working on lately. Does anybody know anything about this? And you'd go, hey, I worked on that. I did it like this. Call so and so. We'd exchange information and we'd be done. And that's what we did. But the urge to do things together was really strong, because it's like, well, we're all here. we could do X. We could train people for DACA. That
Yeah.
became a big thing right away. We worked on the secure communities. We had a study group that went in and went to jails and talked to the sheriff and did all this stuff. And we started getting this taste of like activism. And once we did that, it was like, okay, we have to like sort of change into a group that
Right.
does things. And so we're still kind of in that process of changing. There are still people like Ricardo and Lucia and various people who are kind of have this whole universe of their own of stuff that they do, you know, and so it's still partly getting together and exchanging information and partly talking about stuff that we're doing together. So we haven't become like a real activist organization yet in terms of the way we're put together, I guess you might say. We're in the process of doing that. We're becoming a 501c3.
Right.
We're just filling out all that stuff. And once we do that, that will sort of free us to do some things that it's sort of hard to do now because we can't, it's hard to raise money to do things when you're like, well, we're just some people, and why don't you give us some money and we'll do stuff.
Yeah.
So our friends give us money. People who know us do, but outside organizations and groups that give grants are like, well, I don't know you guys. So it's still a transforming. We're still in the process of becoming something here, I guess. And so I'm really excited to see a lot of this stuff happening because anytime anybody comes in with a clear idea of what they want to do, I'm happy to help them with it, you know. But I try not to make too many promises because I'm very busy in all the stuff that I'm doing, and I don't have a lot of time. I can help, but I can't. You can't say, "Here's my idea,
Right.
take it and run with it." I'm like, no, I'm not running anywhere. I'm running to the bathroom. That's about as far as I'm going. And I think there's a lot of us like that in the group. That we're just like we're almost maxed out, but not quite. We have just enough energy to do a little bit more. So it's really cool. I'm so glad that you we're rapidly approaching the end of our time here. So we should wrap it up. I'm really glad that you're going to be on board for a while and going to be helping with this stuff. And I really hope your studies take you somewhere that you want them to go.
Me
I
too.
mean, this will be cool. Maybe we can do something really neat here with this that you can put on your CV and say, oh yeah, I was part of the group that did this great thing here.
Definitely. Well, thank you very
Sounds
much
good.
for.
I really appreciate your coming, and I'm sure I'll be running into you from time to time.
Oh,
Are you going to
absolutely.
be at the meetings and all that
Yep.
stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see me. You'll hear me talking and be like, oh, God, that guy again. Oh, I suffered through an hour with him the other night. No.
Well, it does go fast. You were right about that. The first 30 minutes felt like 10 minutes, but
It's funny how that works. I think it seems like it's going to be longer. In a traditional interview where it's just like question, answer, like, so what year did you do this? And like, oh, I think that was 19. That takes a long time because there's no interest there. But just talking about stuff is much more interesting. So anyway, well, I'm going to wrap this up and thank you for joining us. You have been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana and UPTV. And we appreciate you joining us. We are here every Monday from 7 to 8 or thereabouts. And our alarm's going off. And anyway, we will be back next week. I'm trying to do this.